Clear? So the question is, sir, when the heat is being transferred in one dimensions, we are having a cold surface here, correct? This is a cold surface. And there is a sample. So there may be temperature gradient. That means within this thickness, we have temperature differences across this thickness, correct? From top to bottom, from here to here, there is a temperature difference. Okay. So now, if you put a guarded heater also, the question posed by the student actually, there will be temperature gradient on this side also. From you are heating it this side, and there may be a temperature gradient this side. So how do you ensure that the temperature gradient is same? If you look at the figure, that is straightforward. The sample, whatever you are keeping, it is the same with the guarded heater also. The cold surface junction that you are giving, it is same as that of the sample. So you don't have whatever the temperature, whatever the heating that you are giving, that goes on both the sides, okay, and for the same sample temperature it will go. So on the lateral sides, whatever you are keeping the proper, whatever the adjacent sides or ambient conditions you are giving, the same conditions I am giving here also for the guarded heaters. Therefore, the temperature gradient across the hot plate as well as the guarded heater plate, both are same. So this is main heater, these are the guarded heaters. Okay, these are the main heaters. It's not guarded heat plate, it is the main heater, and these are the guard heaters. Okay, just to make that correction. Okay, that is one thing that you have to remember. So any more question looking at that figure? Still you can have one question you make. Please think and ask. Is that fine, everyone? No questions? That's very important. So you have a gap over here. You can see here. Okay, there is a gap. Why they both are not in touch with each other? If they are not in touch with each other, then don't you think that there will be resistance across this gap? So air has a low thermal conductivity. This has a different conductivity. This material is having a different conductivity. So whatever heat that comes over here and this don't you think that there will be some difference in the heat because of this medium? Why they have kept the gap? For example, even if you look at this is the actual heater. Okay, this is the main heater. The center one is the main heater. You can see, and there is a 2 mm gap all around the periphery. Okay, 2 mm gap all around the periphery, and then we have these guarded heaters, left, right, top, bottom. Therefore, from the heat transfer will be either from the front to the back. That means perpendicular to the monitor, perpendicular to the direction of the monitor, perpendicular to the monitor direction, right? So it will be from this side to that side, or from that side to this side, into the monitor or out of the monitor. That may be the heat transfer. That's good. But the question is, why the guarded heater and the main heater has a small gap of 2 mm?
Sir, because if gap is not provided, then means if they are in contact, high resistance will be created, sir.
Why resistance will be there? If they are in contact, there will be perfect contact. So there is a temperature there. If the temperatures are same, then there is no heat transfer. No? There is no resistance also.
Sir, at that peripheries, the temperature will keep increasing, sir.
Why? Because you are keeping from the top to bottom, everywhere that you are keeping the temperature same. Why there will be an increase? So imagine that this side, whatever the temperature, this side is also the same temperature. When you keep both together also, there is no heat transfer because the temperatures are same. This is what your expectation. But why are you keeping a gap? Okay, let us think that way. One more way. Suppose if you want to heat this, how do you control the temperature of this? How do you control the heat flux that you are giving to this? We are giving a heater, right? If you go on heating it, what happens? Let's come to an experiment kind of a thing. Okay, you are doing an experiment right now. So you are continuously the current to it, power to it. What happens? Its temperature keeps on going on increasing, correct? but you want the temperature to be consistent, correct? So you need to have a controlling thing. You cannot continuously give the heater thing. So you need to have a controlling mechanism to maintain the temperature. So that means once it reaches, suppose if it is supposed to be reaching 70 degrees centigrade, for example. So if you go on heating it, it will go 71 degrees, 72 degrees. So after it reaches a certain period of time, it has to what happen? It has to switch off so that temperature is maintained the same temperature. And then which we call it as PID controller. All right. So that PID controller will help us to actually control the heating mechanism, okay, which is called as proportional. PID means proportional integral derivative control. Okay, it's an electric device which we use, electronic device which we use based on the electrical principles. So this will help us to maintain the temperature so that there is a small variation in the controlling tip. So what raise we will give, whether you are going just 1 degree above or 0.5 degrees above the specified, that means are you going waiting up to 70 degrees, it has to come, but suddenly 70 degrees it will stop, and suddenly 70 degrees it will stop. It will start a heater. So 70 degrees once you reach, what happens is it may go slightly. If you go on heating it, it may reach 70.1 degrees, 70.2 degrees, slowly 71 degrees. So the PID control or proportional integral derivative control mechanism that we are using, depending on the cost, it will be available from 0.5 degrees to 1 degrees variation. The precise you want, the more cost it would be. Okay, so suppose if I keep it 0.5 degrees variation, that means once it reaches 70.5 degrees centigrade, the power source will cut off. Again, it will come to 70 degrees. Immediately, it will not stop. It will go to 69.5 degrees or something. Again, it will stop. So there is a slight variation, and the better accuracy you want to have, the higher the cost of the equipment. So in order to maintain the variation in both the heater plates such that the temperature difference across these two plates are same, we are maintaining a gap such that there is a temperature difference will always remains constant. So that is the use of this particular gap that we are using in a particular guarded hot plate apparatus. Apart from that, everything I hope you have understood. That is a gap that we are creating. Okay, and there is the same schematic has been shown over here. So you may get a question, sir, what is the size of the sample? The size of the sample is equivalent to the size of both the main heater and the guarded heater. Okay, and you also have to remember that there are two samples over here, right? This is one sample, there is another sample. Okay, there is one sample and there is another sample. So whatever the heat I am transferring, okay, that will be divided into two. So something goes up and something goes down, but it will be equal in proportion. Okay, so so this is the diagram that we have seen. So we have insulation which makes sure that there are no particular heat losses through this. So we will wait for a particular period of time so that it gets to steady state. So that means it comes to an equilibrium position. So you can see that the guard heater, main heater, and there is a small gap, right? Guard heater, main heater, and white. Okay, and there is a sample, and we have some coolant that is coming in and coolant that is going out, such that the temperature of the fluid remains on the side remains constant. Okay, so this is the setup that we will generally use for measuring the thermal conductivity of metals. I hope I am clear. Right, now let us move on to the next topic, which is basically the radial heat flow apparatus. Okay. Which we also call as the guarded heat plate apparatus for liquid samples. How do we use that? So this is the side view, and this is the side view. What we are seeing over here. This is the front view that we are seeing here, front view, and this is the side view. This direction, whatever we are viewing, that is shown here. Okay. So what is the difference between a liquid and a solid when it comes to heating? If you are heating a solid material from the bottom, for example, what happens? The heat from the bottom layer is transfers to the other layer by means of free electrons, or what we call as a diffusion, right? So it happens by that, like free electrons will try, it gets that energy and they jump into the outer orbit and goes to the other molecule, and that's how it goes. Or by the interaction of the molecules, when they get higher energy, this energy momentum will be transferred to the other molecules by collision, and because of the collision, the heat will transfer in solids. Okay, so that's how it happens. But when it comes to liquids, okay, so in liquids, the heat transfer, if you remember the heat transfer course in BME, basic mechanical engineering, you might have understood that heat transfer takes place by means of convection. Again, convection is a combination of both conduction as well as advection, we call it. Okay? Tell you, it is a combination of convection is equivalent to conduction plus advection. What do you mean by advection? Advection means bulk fluid motion. Advection means bulk fluid motion. Just a minute, I will start. Just be online. Sir? Sorry, a senior professor has come, so I just had to answer him. So convection is equivalent to conduction plus advection. That means when the fluid moves as a bulk thing, so when fluid moves, suppose for example, you take a heater plate, okay, and air will be stagnant over it, right? Air will be stagnant over it, and you are heating it by means of some heat flux. Okay? So what happens, this particular layer which is adjacent to the wall, heater wall or heater surface, will get heated up, and when it gets sufficient amount of energy, this will transfer its energy to the other layer. Slowly, what happens, this fluid will try to move. So whatever the lighter air that happens, it tends to have more energy. So therefore, it tries to move, and there is a circulation that starts. So this air starts to move up, and the fellow air will start coming down the layer. So therefore, we kind of get a circulation. So there is a movement of the fluid that happens. So this bulk fluid motion is what we call it as advection. Sir, what do you mean by conduction? The very first layer which is sticking or adhering to the surface because of the no-slip boundary condition. So the fluid layer which is next to the surface, it has friction. Because of friction, it doesn't move. That condition is what we call no-slip boundary condition. So whatever the heat that is being transferred from this to the first layer is by means of friction. From then onwards, it starts movement. So that is what we call it as convection. So therefore, convection is basically a combination of both conduction as well as advection. All right. So the point is, you need to find out conduction. If you want to find out, we need K, thermal conduction. But we don't want to have advection in this particular case. I don't want to have advection. So when advection is there, basically HA delta T. So the whole thing will come in the form of HA delta T. So convection is equivalent to HA delta T. And so this whole thing. So that is basically our heat transfer coefficient. But if I have to advection, what the heat that is being transferred by the convection currents, that is the movement of the fluid, I have to eliminate this so that your convection becomes equivalent to conduction. So that means whatever you are finding out is basically your thermal conductivity of the, okay, Kf dt by dt is something very important. So this will be your equation to solve. Clear? So now, how do I eliminate this convection currents? Suppose if I reduce the space between for the fluid that is there between two plates or surface plates and all. So if I can reduce the size to very small value, so what happens if the thickness of the layer, liquid layer, is in terms of mm's, in terms of mm's, 1 mm or 2 mm, then generally what happens is that the layer that is helping to move the fluid will be lesser. The most of the heat transfer will be taking place by means of. So that means whatever the surface on which the heat is transferring, I am trying to initially, let us say that this is the diameter. I am trying to make this very small layer. Okay? Only small mm of fluid if I can keep. So then mostly the heat transfer happening is restricted to conduction. So therefore there is no convection. If you can do that, then automatically you can find out the respective thermal conductivity. Okay. Any doubts up to this? Any doubts? Okay. So another thing is, if you remember the natural convection, if you are heating the plate, for example, if you are heating the plate, what happens? Because if there is a gradient, if there is a gravity condition, what happens is, suppose if there is, you are heating it bottom, on the bottom, and there is fluid and there is a top surface, for example. Okay. What happens is the heater will supply heat, and after receiving this energy, this will try to move up, and whatever the cold that will come down. So you can see that there is a convection currents that are starting to happen. Okay. For example, if the heater plate is on the top, you are supplying heat from this side. Okay, and the bottom plate is like this. It is at low temperature. So whatever the layer that gets heated is the top layer, but it will not move, correct? It will not move down. It will try to move up. So there are no convection currents that will happen in this configuration when the heater plate is on the top and the cold plate is at the bottom. So always when we are designing this kind of a setup, you need to have a look at in such a way that it is having the heater plate is at the top and the cooling plate is at the bottom to eliminate the convection currents. These are the two requirements that we will follow while designing such a device. Okay, so we can have a very simple setup for showing this guarded hot plate apparatus. I will show you first the guarded hot plate apparatus thing. I have not put in this. I will just show you very quickly the guarded plate apparatus. Just a moment. I want to show you that what I put back. I hope this is clear. This diagram is. Just a moment. Huh? That is kept over here. Okay, this particular layer. And then you also have another layer, another gap that is being produced over here.
Hello. Sir, I think there was a lag in your voice. Like it was not, there was a lag in your voice.
Lag, huh? Should I stop and again start?
Like, did anyone feel like this?
Now, is it okay now?
Yes, sir, it is okay now.
Yeah.
It is okay now.
Okay, right. So you can see over here, there is this guarded heater plate at the top. Okay, and then there is a small gap, and then there is a bottom heater plate we have. So very fine layer of liquid is kept over here in this particular thing, such that whatever the liquid that, this is the coolant side from where the liquid will come in, so that the surface on this side is kept at a lower temperature. The surface on this side is kept at very high temperature, and we also keeping the other side will not get heated such a way that we are keeping another heater plate over here. So naturally on the other sides, this side and this side, we are keeping insulation, and we are waiting for a particular period of time to actually make sure that we can measure the thermal conductivity of the liquid. So this is one way of looking at this. So the thickness of the layer we are choosing is of the order of mm, and therefore the conduction heat transfer is dominant in this particular case. So we also are adjusting the guarded heat input such that there is no temperature difference across this gap between the main and the guarded heater. In this, there is no temperature difference. Therefore, there is no heat transfer from towards this side, on this side, because you are heating it, the main heater, and there is every chance that the heat will transfer this from this side as well as this side. So I'm keeping a guarded heater plate and a gap such that it is maintained at a constant temperature from the top. So whatever the heat travels, that will travel only in this particular direction. And I'm keeping a very thin layer of liquid on this side, and at the bottom I'm keeping a liquid layer which is at lower temperature. So therefore there is a temperature gradient that exists between the main heater as well as the flowing liquid across this fine layer of the liquid for which you want to find out the thermal. So since the layer is of low temperature, you can assume that it is only a conduction dominant phenomena, and therefore by measuring the temperatures here along the surface and averaging it, and by measuring the temperature along this surface, you will be able to find out what is the Q is, what is the Q that you are giving, the surface area, therefore you can find out the thermal conductivity. So this is one guarded heat plate apparatus that you can look at. There is another method which we call it as a radial heat flow apparatus. You can see over here. There is a radial heat flow apparatus where we are keeping a heated plug. We call it as a heated plug or bayonet heater. B-A-Y-O-N-E-T, bayonet heater we also call it as. So this one we also call it as bayonet heater. So this is another heater that we are having, bayonet heater or heated plug. We are giving heat to this surface on this side, and at the center you are having this bayonet heater and a very fine sample. This is a radial one. Okay, so you imagine that there is a cylinder at the center. The heater is of the shape of a cylinder, and on the annular spacings we have the liquid that I want to find out. This particular dots which you are seeing is related to the sample of liquid that you want to find out the thermal conductivity. So there is a very thin layer of liquid that is passing through, the sample of the fluid that comes in and the sample of the liquid that is moving out. We also have that facility that from the bottom it is entering and from the other side top it is leaving. So the liquid will fill this side, and whatever the higher temperature liquid that will go out, and the bottom the temperature will be lower. And at the another thing here is we also have the cooling water that is being supplied here, and the cooling water is moving outside. So imagine that it is a radial body like this. This is a radial. Okay? So we have a thin layer in this particular section. So this thin layer, we are keeping this sample, and on the outer cylinder, and the outer cylinder is maintained with liquid, whatever liquid that. So this is where the liquid is kept. Liquid is fluid, coolant, or liquid or coolant is fluid. So here also, by measuring the surface temperatures across this gap, you can see across this gap, if you can measure the temperatures, you'll be able to find out the. So you have an expression given, QL is equivalent to. So this is one example that we have. But ultimately, what we have to remember from this measurement is, so in the steady state measurement, whenever you are giving heat, it is not only be given to the what is essential here is you have to estimate the heat losses. What do you mean by heat losses? Whatever the heat that I'm giving as an input is completely going to the sample, or it is being transferred to other ambient air by some other means. So that will form your Q dot. Okay, that will be your actual heat flux. So estimating that is one of the most important feature that you need to do. So for that, what we do is, first we have to do a calibration process. Okay, what you need to do is you have to do a calibration process. For example, suppose if you have air outside in all the sides, okay, ambient air. So what I'll do is, first I will not fill this annular spacing, but I will supply Q amount of heat to this heater. Okay, and then you will try to measure what is the thermal thermal conductivity of this air, because for air at different temperatures, it is well documented what is the temperature of, what is the thermal conductivity of air, we all know. So we know what is the dt by dx across this gap when air is kept over here. So you know what is the actual heat flux which is transferring to the air. So this is the hue that we are giving. So this is the initial input we are giving, and finally what is being transferred is Q is equivalent to minus K A dt by dx. Okay, you know the gap dx, you know the gap dx, you know the temperature variation here dt, you know the surface area A, and you also know K, because air thermal conductivity at different temperatures are well documented. So first you will find out what is the actual Q. So what is the heat loss? Q minus Q actual will be your. So while actually doing your experiment also, you know what is the heat loss from this particular experiment. You will at different heat inputs, what is your heat loss, you will find out with temperature difference delta T and loss. So for a different temperatures, what is the loss you are estimating here? So whatever the heat input we are giving here, for that what is the loss you will take out. The rest you are using for the calculation of minus Ka dt by for any particular. So for this radial heat flow apparatus, this is one of the most important thing is your calibration. Clear? Any doubts? So this
No,
thermal conductivity comparators, we have already seen this particular thing in the last class itself. It is a method in which the thermal conductivity of sample is obtained in comparison with another sample of known thermal conductivity. So here we are comparing it. That's why it's called as a comparator. It is especially we are using this for thermal conductivity of good conductors. For example, I need to find out this material thermal conductivity, but it is having higher thermal conductivity. So then we cannot use for hard-coded thermal apparatus. Instead, we will go for thermal conductivity comparator. The principle is as shown in here. So we have a sample of standard reference material. We know this standard sample material here, whose thermal conductivity is known, and generally it will be certified by the manufacturer, and it is placed in series with the unknown, with the material of unknown thermal conductivity. It is kept in series arrangement with the material for which I need to find out the thermal conductivity. So they both have identical cross sections. You are not varying the cross sections, and heat is allowed to flow from one direction to other by suitable packaging of insulation. You can see here there is an insulation, here is insulation, and there is a hot plate, and there is a bottom is maintained at a cold temperature. So whatever heat that I'm giving, it is only transferring in one direction. It will not move in that. So from the front and the back it is insulated. Only from top to bottom heat will transfer. So one-dimensional heat transfer I am trying to take. Now, whatever after attaining steady state, what we can understand is, so QA is equivalent to, you can find out, becomes equivalent to QB. So here this is a known material. So K I know, area I know, the temperature along this thickness dT by dL I can find out. This I can find out. Okay, this I can find out. Similarly, QB, which is KB into B dT by dL. So for the same difference, what is the temperature difference I can find out. But here Ki is known, and you need to find out Kb. The areas are similar. dT temperatures are whatever temperature differences we are getting. Based on that, we'll be able to find what is K. So this is one more method we will use for finding out the thermal conductivity of the high thermal conductivity materials.
Hello, sir.
So, yeah.
Can we do the experiment, this experiment another way, sir?
Yeah, how?
Sir, like we already know our like standard, we are already taken the standard material, reference material.
Mm-hmm.
From there, like we will fix up our hot and cold junction.
Mm-hmm.
First, like without using the material of unknown conductivity. So like we will fix our QA by fixing the hot and cold junctions. Then after adding it to series, we will take it as like how we used to take in resistance. Like those are acting as resistance now, sir. So
Which
like,
one?
sir, means on these materials.
Okay.
So like we know the from the standard measurements, we know the resistance of the reference material. Then we add the second material of unknown conductivity.
It's the same only, no? Resistance is what? Q equal to delta T by R. Whatever is in the equation, you are keeping in the form of resistance. What?
Yes, sir.
It's the same.
Yes,
whatever is there, that is what you are saying in the form of resistance. It's just a mathematical jugglery.
Yes, sir.
What you are doing essentially is the same. How do you measure resistance for a surface? It is for a rectangular surface or something. It is L by Ka. Okay.
Yes, sir.
So L, you know, you are measuring. K, you should know already by some method, and A is area. So you are saying in the form of resistance, but it is necessarily the same only, right? Q1, ultimately whatever heat that I am giving at a steady state, whatever heat flux I am giving through the material A, it should go through material B. The only problem, very important thing is, you should not have any gap in between these two materials.
Yes,
okay,
sir.
because if there is an air gap, so there is a resistance comes over here. Okay, that will vary. Your QA will not be equal to QB. So it should be more or less. You have to fill this gap by suitable high thermal conductivity material, so that there will be not any loss. Okay. Second thing is, we always make sure that by putting some pressure on these two, we are trying to reduce the air gaps in the two materials where they are interfering. Okay, where they both are. Where they both are interfering.
Sir, that means then some gauges should be provided, no, sir. Like when we add some new unknown materials.
Initially we may apply some force, but that initial force that you are applying should not vary the density of the materials itself. So that care you have to take, because density is again a function. So your density of this material should not be varied. So there are so many things. If you actually do a measurement, there are so many things that you need to take into picture. Simply keeping one above the other will not give QA is equivalent to QB. Assumption may not be 100% correct. That is what you are saying. Some errors will come, which may be repetitive in nature. So that is what it will come. So you have to reduce the air gap in between. So what you need to do, what you can do is high thermal conductivity grease or something. If you put in between, then it will be a solution. Yeah.
Yes, sir.
Okay. So some problems I have given, just go through it. If you don't get it, we will discuss in the next class. Just the same things I have given. So just uncertainty problem, just go through it very quickly. Okay. So the next topic I want to go forward. The next topic is transient method. We will be looking at transient measurement. So as I told you, what do you mean by a transient measurement? Just one side of the material, if you are varying its temperature suddenly, all of a sudden, in a very short period of time, how its thermal conductivity is varying. Okay? How it is getting varied. If you want to find out that, because it is not at a steady state, so the temperature is varying, therefore K is a function of temperature, therefore automatically its temperature also gets varied. So how are you ensuring, in some of the applications, you may have to find out that varying thermal conductivity also. So how do you do that? So for that we have laser flash analyzer. This is one method that I am actually telling you. So in a steady state method, thermal conductivity is the property which actually tells you how fastly the material transfers heat. But when it comes to unsteady method, it is not the thermal conductivity. It is the ratio of, suppose I have one material here. So the material has two properties. One is, when I give heat, it may take that heat, either it may store or it can transfer. If it is storing, it will not transfer the heat. The more the storage, the lesser the thermal conductivity. Okay, so the less it transfers. Or if it is having high thermal conductivity, so whatever the energy it takes, immediately to transfer. That means storage capacity is low. So ultimately, how much heat is being transferred within a short period of time is not a function of only K, it is a function of Rho and Cp. So therefore, for unsteady or transient conditions, we have an important property called alpha, which is called as thermal diffusivity, which is defined by K by Rho Cp. K by Rho Cp. So whatever we are, even though we are saying that we are measuring the K, we are also looking at the thermal diffusivity. So that is what I have mentioned. So it's a very interesting methodology that we use, which we call it as laser flash method, in which an energy pulse, by using a laser, we are heating one side of the sample. So let us say this is the sample of very low thickness, and by using a laser, we are sending that laser light and impinging that on one side of the surface so that it gets heated up very quickly. So when it gets heated up very quickly, automatically on the back side, since it's a kind of an impulse, sudden variation in the heat. So the heat starts to transfer to the other side, and with respect to time, we can keep an IR detector or a recorder or on all sides. They keep it in a furnace so that it will be of uniform temperature. So you bring that and keep it here, and then also tries to get the heat, the transfer, the how quickly it attains the temperature on this side is okay. So which is defined as heat conducted by heat stored. Okay. So now what happens is, with the help of the IR detector, okay, with the help of IR detector, I am trying to measure this particular temperature. It will be taking a video kind of a thing for every time sample, for every time with respect to time, what is the variation in the temperature I can take. Okay, with respect to each time. Okay. Right. So and then I can record it and I can use that for whatever purpose that I want. So, but the simplest thing that we want to have that in the form of an equation. How do we do that? So the non-dimensional time is defined like this, which is called as Fourier number. This may be new to you now, but later you will understand this. You have a Fourier number, which is given as alpha t by delta square. Alpha is the thermal diffusivity, t is the time, and delta means the thickness of the slab, this one. This is what we are taking as delta RL, delta RL, the thickness of the slab. So if you look at these units, it will be nothing because seconds and seconds will get cancelled. So whatever you are getting is a non-dimensional. So alpha by t by delta square you are taking. So this is one. And another thing is also the theta, whatever you are taking as non-dimensional temperature, which is T by T max. So how do you calculate T by T max? So this will be nothing but you will, at the end of a particular period of some, for example, I want to find for 5 seconds. So from starting, it can measure from 0.1 milliseconds. So from 0.1 milliseconds to 5 seconds, I have the data of how the temperature is varying, correct? Okay. So whatever the temperature it is attained, this is your T max. Okay, and theta you can measure with respect to this by this, but only thing is when you define this in terms of non-dimensional temperature, its value will be varied between 0 and 1. Whereas here it may be between any numbers. You are trying to make it T by T max such that the range of this theta will be between 0 and 1. Okay, so now by some means you know alpha, you know the material thermal diffusivity of the material, and then with respect to, for example, you have drawn this graph with respect to Fourier number. Since alpha you know, t you know, and thickness you know, you are also finding out what is the theta. So here you don't need the absolute value but a fraction of it. So every time t by t max you are calculating and you have got a graph over example. So let us see here what is the non-dimensional half temperature is 0.5 you have attained in Fourier number non-dimensional time of 137. It's not in seconds, 1.37. So if at all you want to write it, this is 1.37 for example, and delta square is basically your L square thickness by per half, okay, T half. So for attaining the half temperature, whatever you are getting is T half. So which is defined as alpha. For our simplicity, we have written like this. So this will be, let us know that alpha is this, and alpha is also defined as K by rho Cp. So therefore, K is equivalent to alpha into rho Cp. Whereas alpha is defined as this, basically this. So that if you 1.37 rho C L square by T alpha, you can find out K. So the measurement of thermal diffusivity is to be known to find out what is the thermal conductivity. Yes. Clear? So what's the time now? So can I go ahead with the 10 more minutes is there? So I'll try to finish the viscosity also, measurement of viscosity. How many of you know what is actually viscosity? In general, if you have to explain that to a layman, how do you explain what is viscosity?
So resistant to flow.
Resistance?
Resistance caused in order to obstruct something.
No, resistance caused.
In a general terms, we can say how thicker and sticky the flow is.
In a sense, what it is, basically, what it is.
Resistance in between the layers of a fluid.
Correct. Agree. Between the layers. Is that so? For example, imagine you have a table and on top of it you have a book. Okay, you have a book. So when you move the book, what happens? The table at the interface, there is a resistance to the force that you have applied. That resistance to the force that I have applied is called as friction. Agreed? Correct? So, agreed or not?
Yes, sir.
But when you keep a bundle of papers, just papers, not book, it's not bounded anywhere. Just push it. what happens? The papers will be adjusting themselves in a particular way. Suppose if I'm using this structure, so this is the table. Let us say this is the table. Okay, so a bundle of papers, if I move, it will be forming into this particular kind. Correct, isn't it? The top will move. Initially, these are papers, individual papers on top of a table. So if I applied some force, so the top layer will be moving somewhat top, at the bottom will not move at all. The next layer will move something like this. So instead of one at the interface, when it comes to a solid, the resistance force is being applied only at the interface, whereas if it is in terms of a fluid, the resistance force is not only at the interface, friction or resistance. Hello. So can you tell me where the actual I got stopped? Because I never recognized when the internet has gone. Hello.
Sir, for the past 3 minutes.
No. I'm asking whether I finished the discussion of viscosity or not.
No, sir, you are.
No.
I've explained it with the help of a solid and a fluid. No, did I done that, or are you able to listen to it or not?
No, sir.
Okay, let me explain it again. See, viscosity, the effect of viscosity, I have tried to explain. Let me do it again. So you have a book on a particular table. Okay, for example, I have a book on a particular table. Okay, so this is the table, let us say, and this is the book. If you apply some force on this, against this force, there is a resistance force that acts at the interface. Okay, that is what we call it as friction. Okay, when it is to you take a bundle of A4 papers like this, okay, and you keep it on the table. And you keep it on the table, and now apply your force. Now, what you can observe is a thing like there will be the papers will be aligned like this, right? There is a move further by the bottom paper. So what is happening over here in case of a solid, the friction or the resisting force is only happening at the interface, only at one surface. The resistance force in between the layers as well as the surface, we are calling it as viscosity. And that happens in fluids, not in solids. Therefore, whenever you apply shear or tensile stress, the resistance to its deformation and because of the internal fluid friction measure is called as viscosity. Any doubts up to this? Hello? It seems the network has gone again, correct?
No, you are audible. Sir.
I am audible now. But when,
Yeah,
I
yes, sir.
explained, when I explained, you were able to.
Yeah, yes, sir.
Your voice is breaking, sir. Little.
Today, huh?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Anyhow, the time is up now. So we have another class now. Do you have another class?
On 3 to 4, we have one class.
We will continue. All right. Any doubts up to this? Those who has doubts and all, they can stay back. Others, they can leave. Any doubts?
No, sir.
Okay. I hope everything is clear. So we will meet in tomorrow's class 10 to 11. Right. Right. Take care, guys.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.